Sarah Martinez had always prided herself on being unflappable in professional settings, but as she watched the new creative director stride confidently into the conference room that Tuesday morning, she felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Scarlett Hayes commanded attention effortlessly, her auburn hair catching the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Manhattan office. She wore a perfectly tailored navy blazer that somehow managed to look both professional and rebellious, much like the woman herself. "Good morning, everyone," Scarlett began, her British accent adding an elegant lilt to her words. "I know you're all wondering what the girl from London is going to bring to the table." Her smile was infectious, and Sarah found herself leaning forward despite her usual reserved demeanor during meetings. As Scarlett launched into her presentation about innovative campaign strategies, Sarah couldn't help but notice how her hands moved expressively, how her eyes lit up when she discussed creative concepts, and how her laugh seemed to fill the entire room with warmth. The presentation was brilliant, Sarah had to admit. Scarlett's approach was bold and fresh, exactly what their firm needed to stay competitive. But what struck Sarah most was how genuinely passionate Scarlett seemed about her work, how she made even the most mundane marketing metrics sound exciting. When the meeting concluded, Sarah gathered her notes slowly, still processing both the professional insights and her unexpected personal reaction. "Excuse me, Sarah, isn't it?" Scarlett's voice was suddenly right beside her. Sarah looked up to find those striking green eyes focused directly on her. "I was hoping you might have some local coffee recommendations. I'm still getting my bearings in the city, and I have a feeling I'll need plenty of caffeine to keep up with the pace here." Sarah's usual articulate responses seemed to abandon her. "Oh, yes, of course. There's a lovely little place called Brew and Bean just 2 blocks down. They have excellent lattes." She felt heat creeping up her neck as Scarlett's smile widened. "Perfect. Perhaps you could show me sometime." Scarlett's tone was casual, but something in her expression made Sarah's pulse quicken. That evening, curled up on her couch with a cup of tea, Sarah found herself recounting the encounter to her roommate Michelle. "I don't know what it was about her," Sarah admitted, running her fingers through her dark hair. "She just had this presence, you know? I felt so. I can't even describe it. Flustered, I suppose." Michelle looked up from her laptop, studying Sarah's face with knowing eyes. "Flustered isn't exactly your usual state, Sarah. You're always so composed, especially around new colleagues." She closed her laptop and gave Sarah her full attention. "What was different about the Scarlett?" Sarah shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant even as her cheeks warmed at the memory. "Nothing really. She's just very confident, very magnetic, I suppose. It's probably just because she's from London. You know how I've always been fascinated by accents and different perspectives." 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself staying late again, the office eerily quiet except for the hum of computers and distant traffic. She was deep in spreadsheets when she heard footsteps approaching her desk. Looking up, she saw Scarlett walking toward her with 2 containers of Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "Thought you might be hungry," Scarlett said, settling into the chair beside Sarah's desk. "I noticed you've been working through dinner again." "You didn't have to," Sarah began, but her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, making them both laugh. "Come on, let's eat in the conference room. More space to spread out the campaign materials anyway." As they shared lo mein and spring rolls, their conversation drifted from the Henderson account to more personal territory. Scarlett told Sarah about the tiny flat she'd left behind in Shoreditch, about weekend markets and late nights in Soho pubs. In return, Sarah found herself opening up about her structured life, her carefully planned career trajectory, her small circle of close friends. "What about relationships?" Scarlett asked, refilling Sarah's wine glass. "Anyone special waiting for you at home?" Sarah shook her head. "I dated someone for 2 years, Mark from accounting. But it ended last spring. We just weren't right for each other." She paused, then asked, "What about you?" "I left someone behind in London, actually. Emma." Scarlett's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around her eyes. 3 years together, but she couldn't handle the distance when this opportunity came up. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, surprise, certainly, but also something else she couldn't quite name. That must have been difficult. It was liberating, in a way, Scarlett admitted, leaning forward slightly. Sometimes we stay in situations because they're comfortable, even when they're not making us happy. Corporate life can be suffocating enough without hiding who you are on top of it. Their eyes met across the table, and Sarah felt that same electric flutter from weeks ago, only stronger now. When Scarlett reached across to make a point about authenticity, her fingers brushed against Sarah's hand. The contact lasted only seconds, but Sarah felt it like a spark traveling up her arm, settling somewhere deep in her chest. "I should probably head home," Sarah said softly, though she made no move to leave. "Probably," Scarlett agreed, but her hand remained where it was, warm against Sarah's skin. They stayed like that for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared down at their joined hands, Scarlett's fingers warm and steady against her own trembling ones. The office around them felt suspended in time, the city lights beyond the windows casting everything in a soft, dreamlike glow. "Sarah," Scarlett said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would you like to come over for dinner this weekend? I could cook for you. We could work on the Morrison account." Sarah looked up, meeting Scarlett's eyes, and saw something there that made her breath catch. It wasn't really about the Morrison account, and they both knew it. "I'd like that," she heard herself say, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Saturday evening found Sarah standing outside Scarlett's apartment building, clutching a bottle of wine and questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed the buzzer, and when Scarlett's voice crackled through the intercom, warm and welcoming, Sarah felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Scarlett's apartment was nothing like Sarah had imagined. It was cozy and lived in, with plants scattered throughout and the rich aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air. "I hope you like pasta," Scarlett called from the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up and an apron tied around her waist. "It's about the only thing I can make without burning down the building." "It smells incredible," Sarah said, setting the wine on the counter and watching as Scarlett moved with easy confidence around the small kitchen. When Scarlett handed her a wooden spoon to taste the sauce, their fingers brushed, and Sarah felt that same electric jolt from the office. They fell into an easy rhythm, Sarah chopping vegetables while Scarlett stirred and seasoned, their conversation flowing as naturally as it had that night at the office. But there was something different now, an undercurrent of tension that made every casual touch feel significant, every shared laugh feel more intimate. "Here, try this," Scarlett said, moving to stand behind Sarah at the cutting board. She reached around to guide Sarah's hands as she demonstrated how to properly dice an onion, her body warm and solid against Sarah's back. Sarah could smell Scarlett's perfume, something light and floral that made her head spin. "Like this?" Sarah asked, though she was barely paying attention to the onion anymore. She was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, Scarlett's hands covering hers, the gentle pressure of Scarlett's chest against her shoulder blades. "Perfect," Scarlett murmured, but she didn't step away. Instead, she turned Sarah around slowly, until they were facing each other in the narrow space between the counter and the stove. Sarah's breath caught as she looked up into Scarlett's eyes, seeing her own confusion and desire reflected there. "Sarah," Scarlett said softly, her hands coming up to frame Sarah's face. "No one can know about this, but I want you." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Sarah felt something inside her chest crack open, a door she hadn't even known existed swinging wide. "I've never," she started, then stopped, her cheeks flushing. "I don't understand what's happening to me." "You don't have to understand it," Scarlett whispered, her thumb tracing the line of Sarah's cheekbone. "You just have to feel it." And Sarah did feel it, the pull between them that had been building for weeks, the way her heart raced whenever Scarlett smiled at her, the dreams that left her confused and breathless. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Scarlett said, and then she was leaning in, slowly, giving Sarah every chance to pull away. But Sarah didn't want to pull away. For the first time in her life, she wanted to lean in, to discover what lay on the other side of fear. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. Sarah's eyes fluttered closed as she kissed Scarlett back, her hands fisting in the fabric of Scarlett's shirt. It was nothing like kissing the men she'd dated. This was gentler, deeper, like coming home to a place she'd never known she was looking for. When they finally broke apart, Sarah rested her forehead against Scarlett's, both of them breathing hard. "What happens now?" Sarah whispered. Scarlett smiled, pressing a soft kiss to the corner of Sarah's mouth. "Now we figure it out together." The weeks that followed felt like living in a beautiful, complicated dream. Sarah found herself counting the minutes until she could see Scarlett again, whether it was stealing a moment in the supply closet between meetings or finding excuses to work late when the office emptied out. They became masters of deception, crafting elaborate stories about client dinners that were actually quiet evenings at Scarlett's apartment, or weekend work sessions that involved more kissing than actual work. "We need to review the Morrison account," Scarlett would announce during team meetings, her eyes finding Sarah's across the conference table. "Sarah, can you stay after to go over the details?" The innocent request would send Sarah's heart racing, knowing that reviewing accounts had become their code for stolen moments together. Their secret relationship took on a rhythm of its own. Tuesday evenings became sacred when they discovered the office building's rooftop access, where they would share takeout and watch the sunset over the city's skyline. Thursday mornings meant arriving early to share coffee in Scarlett's office before anyone else arrived, the blinds carefully adjusted to hide their intimate conversations. Weekends were precious escapes to Scarlett's apartment, where Sarah could finally relax into this new version of herself without fear of discovery. But the constant hiding was taking its toll. Sarah found herself jumping every time someone knocked on Scarlett's office door while she was inside, or feeling guilty when Michelle asked about her mysterious new social life. The weight of the secret pressed against her chest during family dinners when her mother asked about dating, and she deflected with vague comments about being too busy with work. Desperate for guidance, but unable to reveal the full truth, Sarah began tentatively reaching out to Nancy, a progressive colleague from the design team who had always seemed open-minded and approachable. Over lunch at a trendy cafe downtown, Sarah carefully tested the waters. "Nancy, can I ask you something hypothetical?" Sarah stirred her soup nervously. "What would you think if someone at work was exploring different aspects of their personal life?" Nancy raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "You mean like discovering they're attracted to someone they never expected to be attracted to?" Sarah's cheeks burned. "Maybe. Honey, love is love," Nancy said gently. "And if this hypothetical person is happy, then that's what matters. Though I imagine keeping it secret at work must be incredibly stressful." The conversation gave Sarah some comfort, but it also highlighted how exhausting the deception had become. At work, she and Scarlett had to maintain professional distance while every fiber of Sarah's being wanted to reach out and touch her. During presentations, Scarlett's hand would brush against Sarah's as they passed documents, sending electricity up her arm. In meetings, their eyes would meet across the room, and Sarah would have to force herself to look away before anyone noticed the longing in her gaze. The near misses were becoming more frequent and more dangerous. Last Tuesday, David from accounting had walked into the break room just as Scarlett was tucking a strand of hair behind Sarah's ear, forcing them to jump apart and pretend they were discussing coffee preferences. On Friday, Sarah had been so lost in watching Scarlett present to clients that she hadn't heard William ask her a direct question, earning her a concerned look from her boss. "We're going to get caught," Sarah whispered to Scarlett as they stood in the elevator together one evening, the tension between them palpable despite being surrounded by other colleagues heading home. "Would that be so terrible?" Scarlett murmured back, her voice barely audible. Sarah's stomach clenched. The truth was, she didn't know. Part of her was tired of pretending, tired of deflecting questions and making excuses. But another part of her was terrified of what would happen if their secret came to light. Her parents, her career, the judgment of colleagues, the potential complications at work, it all felt overwhelming. That night, lying in Scarlett's arms after another evening of careful planning and strategic timing, Sarah traced patterns on Scarlett's shoulder and wondered how long they could keep living in the shadows. She was falling deeper in love every day, but with that love came a growing awareness that their beautiful secret was becoming a beautiful burden, one that was getting harder to carry with each passing day. The test of their secret relationship came sooner than either of them expected. Sarah's phone buzzed during a quiet Tuesday morning at work, and her mother's cheerful voice announced that she and Sarah's father had decided to drive up for a surprise visit that weekend. Sarah's blood ran cold as she glanced across the office at Scarlett, who was presenting campaign ideas to a small group of colleagues, her hands moving expressively as she spoke with that confident energy Sarah had fallen in love with. "That's wonderful, Mom," Sarah managed, forcing brightness into her voice while her mind raced. "I can't wait to see you both." The weekend felt like walking through a minefield. Sarah introduced Scarlett as her colleague when they inevitably ran into her at the coffee shop where they'd shared so many intimate conversations. Watching Scarlett shake her father's hand with polite professionalism, seeing her mother smile warmly at this woman she knew nothing about, Sarah felt like she was betraying everyone she loved. Scarlett played her part perfectly, discussing work projects and making appropriate small talk, but Sarah caught the hurt that flashed in her eyes when Sarah's mother asked if she was seeing anyone special. "Not at the moment," Scarlett replied smoothly. "I'm still getting settled after the move from London." That evening, after her parents retired to their hotel, Sarah called Scarlett from her car in the parking garage, needing to hear her voice, but unable to risk going to her apartment. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered into the phone. "I know that was hard." "It's fine," Scarlett said, but her voice carried a distance that made Sarah's chest ache. "I understand the situation." But understanding and accepting were different things, and Sarah could feel the strain building between them like pressure before a storm. The storm broke the following week when William assigned them to collaborate closely with Ryan Morrison, the charming account executive who had joined the firm 6 months earlier. Ryan was everything Sarah was supposed to want: handsome, successful, funny, and completely smitten with her. He brought her coffee without being asked, complimented her presentations, and found excuses to stop by her desk throughout the day. "He's really into you," Nancy observed during lunch, watching Ryan wave at Sarah from across the cafeteria. "You could do worse." Sarah smiled noncommittally, but she could see Scarlett's jaw tighten from their table across the room. That evening, when they finally found themselves alone in Scarlett's apartment, the tension that had been building finally erupted. "You should just date him," Scarlett said, her voice sharp as she poured herself a glass of wine with more force than necessary. "It would certainly make your life easier." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah asked, though she knew exactly what it meant. "It means I'm tired of being your dirty little secret, Sarah. I'm tired of watching you light up when he flirts with you and pretending it doesn't hurt. I'm tired of being introduced as just your colleague when I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and painful. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes because Scarlett was right, and that made it worse. "You don't understand," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "If my parents knew, if my family found out, they're traditional, Scarlett. My father still makes jokes about people like us. And work. What if this affects our careers? What if people think we're unprofessional? What if they think we only got our positions because we're sleeping together?" "People like us?" Scarlett repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what I am to you? Something to be ashamed of?" "That's not what I meant," Sarah said desperately, but she could see the walls going up in Scarlett's eyes, the protective distance she created when she felt vulnerable. "Maybe it is, though," Scarlett said sadly. "Maybe that's exactly what you meant, and you don't even realize it." They stood in Scarlett's kitchen, 2 feet apart but feeling like strangers, both of them crying for different reasons. Sarah wanted to bridge the gap between them, wanted to take back her words and promise that everything would be different. But the fear that lived in her chest like a cold stone wouldn't let her move, wouldn't let her be the person Scarlett needed her to be. The next few weeks passed in a blur of professional politeness and carefully maintained distance. When Walter announced the creative director promotion during the Monday morning meeting, Sarah felt her stomach drop as she watched Scarlett's face remain perfectly composed. They were both qualified, both respected, but now they would be competing against each other while nursing their broken hearts. "This is exactly what we need," Tyler whispered to his desk neighbor, loud enough for others to hear. "Some healthy competition between our star players." His smile carried an edge that made Sarah uncomfortable, especially when she caught him watching her and Scarlett during meetings with calculating eyes. The office dynamics shifted subtly but noticeably. Colleagues began choosing sides, and Sarah found herself drowning in the politics of it all. When she overheard Tyler telling a group by the coffee machine that Sarah and Scarlett seemed awfully close for just work friends, her blood ran cold. At the company's quarterly celebration party, Sarah's worst fears materialized. Standing near the bar with Ryan, who had been increasingly attentive since her parents' visit, she caught fragments of conversation from a nearby group. "I'm just saying, they spend a lot of time together," someone was saying. "And did you see how Scarlett looked when Sarah was talking to Ryan earlier?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Without thinking, she turned to Ryan with a bright smile that felt like broken glass in her mouth. "You were saying something about dinner this weekend," she said loudly enough for the gossipers to hear. Ryan's face lit up. "Absolutely. I know this great place downtown." From across the room, Sarah saw Scarlett watching, her expression shifting from confusion to hurt to something that looked like disgust. When their eyes met, Scarlett shook her head slowly and walked away. Later, in the empty parking garage, Scarlett cornered her. "Really, Sarah? You're going to pretend to date him now?" "I'm not pretending anything," Sarah lied, hating herself with each word. "You're ashamed of me," Scarlett said quietly. "You're ashamed of us, and you're ashamed of yourself." "I can't do this anymore." The days that followed were torture. Sarah barely slept, barely ate, replaying Scarlett's words over and over. She'd lost the woman she loved because she was too afraid to fight for her. "You've been miserable," Michelle said gently, finding Sarah crying on their couch again. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Sarah looked up through her tears. "What if I lose everything?" "Haven't you already lost what matters most?" The next morning, Sarah stood outside the conference room where the weekly team meeting was in progress. Her heart hammered as she pushed open the door, interrupting William mid-sentence. "Sarah, we're in the middle of..." "I'm sorry, but I need to say something." Sarah's voice shook but held firm. "Scarlett and I are together. We're in love, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The room fell silent. Scarlett's eyes widened in shock from across the table. "I was afraid," Sarah continued, looking directly at Scarlett. "But losing you is worse than any fear." Nancy started clapping first, then others joined in. William cleared his throat. "Well then, let's get back to business." 6 months later, Sarah helped Scarlett hang pictures in their new apartment, finally free to love openly.